I want a scholarship. I want a scholarship. No, I need a scholarship. Did you hear me? Or do I need to scream a lot louder with my barely heard voice obstructed by a society placing value only on the rich and the privileged? Do you know that I'm tired of people telling me that I should be grateful just because I'm a college student and it's rare for poor people like me to be educated? Do you know that I don't mind walking in front of a moving automobile, be it a bus or a car, because I want someone to help me pay my expensive tuition? Do you know that I go on days without food because as long as I don't feel like fainting each 2 minutes, I believe I can still live with an empty stomach? Would you shut me up as usual? Or would you listen when I say education is a luxury, when I say education is a conspiracy? The government has initiatives, they say take those initiatives, they say living in a country segregated by status and social class, while the government denies us fairness and justice, telling us to stay in sekolah kebangsaan. As doctors, directors and ministers are from private institutions and international universities, but not getting such an expensive education pays us to minimum wage jobs working 24/7 is a struggle to feed my 4 younger siblings, and don't get me started on scholarships I had no idea they exist. But the government says that education is free. The government says that education is for all. The government says that education is the key. But why is the key reserved only for the rich and the poor scrapes the bottom, hoping to scramble in? They need a scholarship. What's the point of getting 9A plus in SPM when I was one of 100 people who finished my secondary education? Were my 99 friends too lazy and too stupid that they couldn't stand sitting down in the library and studying until their heads burst with too much knowledge? But did you know that they couldn't even afford books in the first place? No, of course you don't. The teachers beat them with the infamous tin rotan for writing on a piece of paper they borrowed from friends. The girls were shamed for wearing too short of a skirt that shows their ankles, while those were the only clothes they had. Coming to schools with slippers because they couldn't buy a decent pair of shoes opened an extreme path of mocking and bullying. My friends, smart, witty, a bunch of great people, were school dropouts, not because they were not intelligent enough, but because they were so poor that they decided it was more worth it to quit. The money they used to buy exercise books can afford them a month worth of milk. The money for the uniforms can buy diapers. Walking for hours to school doesn't mean anything if you can work in a cheap restaurant, getting money while at it. These compassionate people, these great people of mine, only thinking of the family, are spitted on by those with titles, be it Encik or Puan from Kerajaan, labeling them as lazy, incompetent fools who destroyed their future dropping out of school. And these dropouts shame the society. They exist without reason, they think they're dirty. But if they had more money, they could probably be the next Prime Minister who could do so much better than you. Instead of using your power to reel your family into the office, instead of abusing the authority you hold, they know how it feels to be at the brink of living, and they'll help those who are actually in need. My students need a scholarship. I need to find work experience, and my work experience broke me to pieces. My students were the homeless. My students were orphans. My students were penniless. The most problematic ones are working at night and causing troubles during the day because she just can't get her homework done. Some are constantly absent from school because they just have to work just to make sure the younger siblings have food to eat. And teachers call them haram jadah for tipping the attendance scale without respecting them as humans with feelings. And God knows, I was curious of what happened. But when I asked the teachers, they said, "Why do you even care? Problematic students get what they deserve." I see. The good teachers are sent to schools with overachieving students, while the ones who became teachers just to secure a job with a stable income, those with no actual regards to education, those who don't understand what gender inequality or capitalism is, are sent to schools where no children are interested. And yet they blame the students for not being grateful and begins comparing our country to Bangladesh or Indonesia, not realizing that's just red herring at its finest. So my students need a scholarship. At least it would put them in such a better environment and they get the exposure they need, not in a pool of miserable party poopers who carry a whip to beat students just because they can't get an answer right. And we need you to stop judging. We need you to stop talking. I had a conversation with a friend who finds the poor a menace, and his cruel words with disgust and contempt still ring in my head. The poor is a bunch of lazy people not knowing how to use the money, he said. Look, I get it that you're superior than all of us due to all the money that you get from your dad. But you are in no place to represent our circumstances in society. You are in no place to speak for us as if you know everything. A crowdfund post on Twitter asked people to donate to this poor kid because she doesn't have money to pay for her IGCSE course. And guess who replied? A privileged bitter student who told her to stop demanding expensive education when she herself can't afford it. But you don't understand. You don't understand that some people like us see the opportunity like finding a piece of gold in an abandoned mine that we are too scared to let it go. You, who are imbued with many choices in your education, need to shut up. You say we only need SPM to succeed these days. But what's the point of scoring well when seats for famous scholarships exist for these children of Dato and Datin out of their wish to maintain connection? How can these children manage to be shortlisted for a scholarship when the credibility they want is a student with tons of volunteer experience, knowledge and music, certificates in scuba diving or martial arts, or even some freaking set of bourgeoisie skill when the only thing we could afford was the bus fee going back and forth to school? I'm lucky, they say. I'm lucky because I ended up in an international universities. I'm lucky because I end up in an international university studying literature, but I started with no self-esteem as my peers were all prodigies who read Dickens, performed Shakespeare and watched Hamilton when the only book I'd finished was the Quran, and that's just because my parents were Muslims. So I want a scholarship. I want a scholarship because good grades are not enough. I want a scholarship because my friends are planning for their master's degree, while all I can think about is the 40k ringgit student debt I accumulated. I want a scholarship because I have a dream so big that I am not able to afford it on my own. I want a scholarship because I'm sick of the system of power controlling the flow of money. I want a scholarship because education is expensive, living and it's expensive, and all I want to do is not exist.